All right, we're live. Welcome to another Vervoe webinar. It's 10 a.m. in the world's most livable city, 8 p.m. in New York, 5 in California, and in the UK, hopefully you're going to bed. We're going to talk about the skills shortage. Apparently there are more vacancies than people on the planet at the moment. This is part of a series of webinars that I'm hosting. So you're stuck with me for a month, but don't worry, we've got expert panelists who are more knowledgeable and more enjoyable to listen to. And today we have Melina Pamminger from Serco. A bit about Serco. It's a massive global company that delivers public services all over the world, from things like immigration, prisons, healthcare, including a range of COVID-related services. Melina leads the people services function in Asia Pacific. And just to give you a sense of the scale of that function, Melina is responsible for 6,000 roles a year, 24,000 cases, 30,000 customer service inquiries, and 250,000 pay slips a year, as well as all of the data analytics. Melina, welcome.
Thank you, Eamon. Thank you so much for having me today.
Great to have you. Now let's get straight into it. We've been hearing about the skills shortage. We've been hearing about the candidates market. It sounds like the apocalypse. Is it real? Is it fiction? Is it science fiction? What's going on?
Look, absolutely, it's real. And I think, speaking to a lot of my industry peers, is the same conversations are being had across the table. Is there's a scarcity of talent. We're not seeing the numbers we used to. We've got some great sort of data that we capture every year in terms of how many applications come in, and we're significantly under. So normally we'll get about 70,000 applicants a year. At the moment, we're sort of tracking at half that. So, we're not seeing the candidates apply the way that they did. So of course you have to go out and work out why and start to fix those channels.
So, okay, so you're getting half the applicants. So where have they gone? Are they hiding? Have they changed careers? What's happening?
Look, I think people have got, I think the first thing that we looked at, because we looked at across the board in terms of leadership roles right through to our frontline roles, people aren't moving. So there's this, obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, so people are preferring to stay in the safer roles, the roles that they currently have. So people aren't making those career choices as easily. The second thing is we've just a lack of mobility. So we've had obviously no global mobility, no candidates coming in. Borders are closed, and even our internal borders are closed. So people aren't migrating to other states. So you're not seeing that sort of fluid candidate movement. Third is obviously we've got JobKeeper and a lot of initiatives to support our workers. So some people are making economic decisions not to apply for roles and wait until JobKeeper ends and go back either to their current roles or start looking for work. And wage pressures. So we're looking at probably about 2 to 3% at the moment in terms of wage inflation. And if you're not competitive in the market with those pay rates, then you're not going to get that trickle of candidates.
So before we get stuck into sort of what companies can do and what the candidate experience can or should look like, I just want to pick up on one of the points you made around people wanting a safety net and not wanting to leave. So that's one narrative. Another narrative that we're hearing a lot about is the great resignation, and that people have been waiting and now they're ready to leave for better choices, companies that allow flexible working. So do those two things make sense together, or is one of them the truth?
Look, I think, I've worked in this industry for quite some time, and I haven't seen this level of choice for candidates in a long time. You look at Seek, and there's 18,000 roles for contact centre employees. Now, we need thousands of contact centre employees, and there's just a plethora of choice. So I think it is very much that whole notion of it's a candidate market. They can absolutely pick and choose where they want to go. So you need to stand out from the pack. That's the most salient point. And that's where our focus is lying at the moment.
Okay, so let's get into that. So one of the things that we've been hearing, and I've heard this personally, is, it's a tough market. It's a candidates market. Repeating some of the themes that you've mentioned around everyone's hiring, candidates have choice, we'll hire anyone with a pulse. That I've literally heard that said, and I can understand, I can empathize that people feel that sort of pressure. Should we hire anyone with a pulse? Is that what it's come to?
Well, look, I'll be honest, we did do that. So and I go back to 2020 where this all started. We weren't sure how we're going to fare through the pandemic. We weren't sure if we were going to shut up facilities. What we were hoping for is, our customers needed to pivot and request our services for support, and they did. So during the pandemic, we had an additional 2,500 roles, and we were learning how to work from home. We didn't quite have the technology to work from home. We had to literally evacuate our office within 48 hours. So it was a mad scramble to set that up. We had new starters in the team. We had to learn how to train remote. These are all things that we were all doing last year. We've become seasoned campaigners now, but 12 months ago, we were all scrambling, not knowing how long it was going to end. We had to then start looking at how we ran our recruitment process. We do large-scale recruitment where we're looking at thousands and thousands of candidates for hundreds and hundreds of roles at any given time. So we did the big assessment centres. All of a sudden, we couldn't do that anymore. We had to find technology to start video interviewing. We talked about it as an organisation for so long. It was implemented within a week because that was our only choice, to be able to connect with candidates. So in that, we did make some poor decisions and we were putting some bums on seats. The market was in a state of flux. We were in a state of flux. And we are seeing the impacts to that. We're seeing, our attrition as an organisation has stayed pretty static for quite some time. It has spiked as a result. So absolutely we made those not wrong decisions. I think they were the right decisions at the time, but we're certainly experiencing the challenges of it now.
What are some of those challenges that you're experiencing as a result of, to use your words, putting bums on seats really quickly?
Look, I think the most important thing that does happen is a bit of brand damage. So, we were very proud of our brand and we still are very proud of our brand, but, a lot of candidates came in, were pivoting very quickly. We stood up a contact centre in Essendon, literally finding a facility, setting it up and putting, 800 or so staff in there within a week or two. And of course, we had teething problems there. So people come in and sort of see maybe an element of disorganisation. Well, it was organised chaos, but unfortunately, there were sort of a bit of attrition. So really it's that brand damage, but also we know the cost of rehiring. We've all got our stats around that, is at 75% of their first year's salary. So, there's that cost of absolutely rehiring and the pressure it puts on our operations, on our leaders to train, for them to be available, to continually be part of those hiring decisions.
So we don't want to bring the wrong people into the company, either people who won't perform or who don't want to be there. I think that's pretty obvious. But we do want to be competitive and we do want to be quick and we don't want to miss out. So how do we make sense of that? So let's start to unpack that. What are some of the things that companies can do to, first of all, to be an attractive destination? Let's answer that first, and then we'll sort of lead into the candidate experience itself and the sort of screening and hiring process.
Look, the good news is a lot of the things that we're doing today, we already had them in place or in train before, let's say, the pandemic. So we were able to learn from the pandemic. And what it's done, I've sat on quite a few global forums around lessons learned. And one of the things that was really clear about ASPAC is that we had a lot of this innovation in place, but COVID has forced us to make quicker decisions and more risky decisions. We have been, our decision making is a lot better and a lot quicker at the moment. So some of the things that we had in place before, but certainly well and truly in train at the moment, is better selection. So obviously a lot more better selection around our candidates, leveraging off third-party relationships. We're very committed to diversity and inclusion. So it's focusing on those third-party relationships a lot better. Our brand, we had done some great work with a brand scan. So we'd gone out to the market a couple of years ago and did a complete brand scan of where we sat, and we learnt from that, and we started and have put in place some really good EVP. I know that's a term that everybody uses, but we have very much focused on that quite a lot over the last couple of years.
Can you give an example of that for the audience so that they understand, like, what's something really tangible that people can take away in terms of promoting the brand?
First up, you need to identify who you are, really identify. You look at the big brands that do it well, like BHP, they're on TV, you know who they stand for and what they stand for, they're very community orientated. With Serco, it's hearts and minds, it's the stories. We change a lot of lives on the front line. We weren't quite conveying that. So these are people have been in prison for a while with Serco and come out with a HSC or a qualification. So it was those really beautiful stories on the front line that appeal to the altruism out there. We're not just prison guards, and we're not just contact centre people. We change lives. So we identified that, and it's quite a powerful message. And then getting that out into the platform. So we've got some marketing tech that sits behind our applicant tracking system. We've got landing pages now for all our sites, so people get sort of channeled into a great landing site. And obviously in amongst all of the other Seeks and Indeeds and all the other channels that we can saturate, but definitely defining who you are is the most important thing.
So it's just to repeat that and make sure I understand and everyone in the audience understands correctly. So you're saying giving candidates an opportunity to understand what the company stands for, the purpose and the impact that they might have by working there.
Absolutely. If you went out into the market, if you're competing with 18,000 roles with just a seat, with just a banner or just your logo, you're not standing out from the crowd. So we've got some good Serco and 24-hour videos that are 3 minutes, keep them short and sharp, so they can absolutely identify with the company. We're not, I think I read somewhere through our CEO, Serco is one of the biggest brands you know nothing about. So we had that additional challenge. We weren't a very known or a household brand. So we've had to come in, which is also great because we're able to create, the persona that we wanted. There was no sort of real preconceived notions. So we created that from scratch. But yeah, it's definitely, you need to capture them. We need to capture them in the first couple of minutes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if we do a good job in standing out and sending a strong message to candidates about why they might want to consider us as an employer. The next part is, okay, the selection process itself, what does that look like? And there are a lot of, there's a lot of discussion about, do we skip steps? Do we make it faster? Does it add friction? Mm-hmm. Do you buy into that? Or there's another narrative around, well, we can use the selection process to create an experience that is memorable, even additive to the candidate, while still being rigorous around selection. And this is not a black and white thing, by the way. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Look, I think everyone in this call is suffering with that same challenge. We've got customer demands, we've got internal demands to get those people in the door pretty quickly. But there are things that we can do and things that we can control. And I think for us, we've spent a lot of time on the candidate journey. And I know today's topic is definitely about creating a seamless candidate experience. We've grown a lot. So we're literally mapping out and have mapped out the entire candidate experience with all the touch points. And we found, we found a lot of things that we were doing that we didn't need to do. And we tracked the candidate all the way through. I encourage everyone to go through your application process and see what the candidates go through. I'm not sure if we all have, but jump in, apply for a job and see where that takes you.
Just to jump in on that, you mentioned, because it's a really important point, you said you found some things that you were doing that you don't have to. Can you give is that like unnecessary form filling or duplication? Is it that kind of thing or something else?
It is, unfortunately for us, because we work on behalf of state and federal governments, there's a lot of compliance. So we've got national police checks, and we've got any pre-employment check you can think of, we have to do, and is contractually bound. So what we try to do is we can't avoid the inevitable. There are things that we just can't control. So what we're trying to do is minimize those contact points. Instead of sending 3 links, like a video interview link, a reference check link, a pre-employment medical, trying to contain those into one and trying to look at some tech where it's just, we still want to be high touch, but we want to be seamless as well.
Okay, so if there's sort of duplication or steps that are, cleaning up some of that kind of admin the admin burden for the candidate that's not adding a lot of value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
The other thing is we've got some great initiatives that come out of our business, actually. One's called Care to Connect, and that is we've got to also remember we've got candidates who are offboarding, whether we work quite seasonally as well, peaks and troughs. So we onboard and we offboard. So an example of that is we work with the tax office, so we know it's quite seasonal. Where we used to say goodbye to our candidates in a sort of candidate plethora market, we now run programs where we connect with them. So we put them together, we keep them warm for the next opportunity. So we're really looking at it end to end. And I think it's very important to remember those candidates that are coming off, or those candidates that applied for the roles but weren't successful, is capturing those opportunities now where we never had to before. We'd put something up on on those job boards and get a whole new range of candidates to work through. Well, we're just not getting that. So you've really had to start getting creative about anyone who's touched your business.
Speaking of people who have touched your business and getting creative, that made me think of another point, and it's come up in the questions that we've received in advance. So if it's so hard to attract people in the normal way and through the normal channels, should we be, or could we be also looking to candidate markets that perhaps are less obvious, underserved, underrepresented groups, people with less obvious backgrounds, people who are not don't necessarily fit the mold and not the same type of people who we're used to hiring? Mm-hmm. And whether that's different age groups, different demographics, whatever, it might be different locations. Sometimes locations not possible if you need someone in a physical, but is that something that it's talked about? People like to write articles about it, but let's be practical. Is that possible? Can we do that?
Absolutely possible. Absolutely. We hire on attitude. Skills largely get taught as well, but we have had to pivot and we've had to give opportunities. We're looking at completely different markets, but I think the main point there, Omar, is you have to influence your hiring managers. And I know there's probably a number of people on here who come from agencies, so I tap into my recruitment agency days where the job brief will come in and it's so specialised. They need to be an engineer who's worked with this particular tool in this particular industry, and they're rare as hen's teeth now. So it's about influencing your hiring managers, and that's something that we've really worked on with our talent acquisition team is, we're almost salespeople as well. We've got to not so much sell the candidates through, but we've got to educate our hiring managers that this is what the market looks like at the moment. And these are the candidates that I'm presenting you with. You don't necessarily fit the skill brief, but we need to think outside the square. And quite often we do. It's interesting, the people we hire for our custodial officer roles, they come from an absolute range of industries where it used to be, they had to have a securities background or specific industries. Now we're hiring them from retail and all sorts of industries because we're starting to look at those soft skills that we need. We need resilience. We need those sorts of skills rather than absolute experience in that particular industry.
So you mentioned influencing hiring managers. Presumably that's to get them to sort of open up or relax some of the more stringent requirements around must have 5 years of this and this degree and those kind of things. But what about sending a message to the market? How do we access some of those underrepresented groups or less obvious pools of candidates? And do we need to do something different in the process itself? You mentioned hiring for attitude and teaching skills. So presumably we can't just go about it business as usual and expect, if we're hiring people who've never done the job before, presumably we need to teach them. So what are the changes that we need to make in our process to accommodate people who are less obvious candidates?
You really need to go back and look at your ad writing. I don't know if we do that often enough. We are so busy as an organisation. We'll regurgitate the same advertising over and over again, and we'll fall victim to that. I encourage everyone on this call to go back and have a look at your suite of advertising and see if it's tailored for today's market, because I can guarantee most of us will probably go, wow, we put down 30 skills that we want. The person's going to read 5 and go, yep, that's not for me. So ad writing guidelines, I think, are really critical. Just really change it up for today's market. Refresh all your advertising. Some of the stuff that we've done is we washed some of our ads. We had some tech a while back because we're trying to close that gender gap. So we washed some of our ads through only to find that we weren't appealing to the, say, female market, because, studies have shown they'll read through 7 criteria and think, well, I don't meet 7 of them, so I'm not going to apply. Whereas studies have also shown the male reads through 3 and all of a sudden...
I've got one.
I'm good. So, we've had to pivot and tailor. I really encourage us to have a look at our ads, because that is, ultimately what people apply to. Are they edgy? Are they punchy? Are they, reflecting the skills that you are or aren't looking for, and appealing to those people who never would ordinarily apply for those types of roles?
Now we're getting flooded with questions from the audience, so I apologise in advance. We won't be able to get through all of them, but I'll try and weave in as many as possible. So one question that's come through that's relevant to what we're discussing now is passive candidates, and people who are, they're not applying for jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever, but may be great, may be suitable, and may be interested. How do you think about that? What can companies do to appeal to passive candidates?
I think, look, we've talked about that at length. One of the things we need to look at is dedicating some resources to that passive market. I know that we're all stretched as talent acquisition functions. We've got just enough resources to fill the jobs that we've got right now. If that. We run very lean teams, and I can guarantee most people here are probably nodding their heads. We are very lean. We're a cost overhead. We don't bring in revenue, so we try to keep our costs down. So if there's any way you can sort of look at your team or sort of repivot your internal function to focusing on that candidate sourcing, I think that's becoming more and more important than recruitment, is actually sourcing and dedicating resources to that element. So that would be people, if you're trying to if you've got a dashboard of 50 roles at the moment, you don't have time to sit there and passively look through that passive talent market. But if you dedicate some resources to it, you have much better success. Okay,
that makes sense. Coming back to the screening or evaluation component, and we've had a lot of questions on this. Once we get candidates into the funnel, what can we do to make it more exciting, more immersive, or sort of more of a way to get them to buy in, as opposed to feeling like they're going to the dentist? What can we do to make that process, an opportunity rather than a hurdle for people?
Look, that's probably one area that we are exploring at the moment. It does feel like a bit of a process with us, because we've got so many gates that we go through. Look, I think innovation's the key, and there's a lot of, I think there's ways that we can, innovation is definitely the word here. I think we need to find something that's exciting. I mean, I've heard of gamification. I've heard of ways that you can really appeal particularly to sort of demographics like the millennials. We're not quite there yet as an organisation, so I can't sort of talk to this quite confidently, but you've made an absolute point. I'm probably going to use that. I don't want it to feel like a trip to the dentist.
Well, I think and this is not just a function of market conditions. I think people want to feel like they're being set up for success. It's daunting to apply for a job.
Absolutely.
And you're sort of under scrutiny and you're being judged as it is. And that's okay. People accept that. But I think if there's an opportunity or a way to make people feel like they can put their best foot forward, and if then after doing that, if after being given a fair chance they don't get the job, that's okay. Most people are okay with that. But I think people resent sort of not being able to put their best foot forward, not being given a fair go, and then being told no without that opportunity, and that makes people frustrated. I think if there's a way to do that, that's particularly in this market when people are saying, well, I've got 5 other job offers and actually I'm happy with my current job. So, why do you want to then sort of torture me through a process rather than make it more memorable job? And just to finish this point, I think companies have an opportunity to differentiate in this area and actually make that process a competitive advantage and fun. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, I think the key here is that candidate care. for a long time had a lot of choice, and I'm not sure we were doing the right things by candidates, even at the end, to go through a whole process where you've gone through pre-employment checks and what have you, only to be given an email to say you're unsuccessful. I think those days are gone. I think that's why, as I was saying before, we've got to look at care at the end of the process. They might not be successful for that role, but they need to come into a pool of candidates where you do connect with them regularly to create that. And they talk. They now rate us. There's company ratings all over the place. You get onto those job boards. Have a look at your company rating. Does everyone here know what theirs is? Ours is, changed a bit over the last 12 months, and that means a lot to us. We've got to get that right.
So the message there is around maintaining high standards, because you don't want to end up with the wrong people, but making the process more about candidate success than let's go with the dentist analogy than going to the dentist. So another theme that's coming up a lot is influencing hiring managers. That we're getting a lot of questions around that, and it's connected to diversity. So what I'm reading into it is people are saying, well, we want to attract candidates that are from different, less obvious backgrounds, but we've got people inside the company who have the final say, or certainly a big say in who's hired, and they want to stick to kind of something, quite narrow parameters. How do we, have you got any examples or advice of successfully influencing hiring managers to think more broadly, more creatively about who we're bringing into the company?
Yeah, look, I encourage people to work with their L&D teams, if you have one, to get some sort of, we need as talent acquisition specialists, we need to be trained. So we need to be given the tools for success. We need to, remember, we're all, leaders here today, but, think of your team who are entry-level recruiters coming in for their first job, how they feel about influencing a hiring manager. So they need to get some proper training. How to do that. And I think the second thing is, and with something we're starting to explore, blind resumes. So we're starting to look at literally stripping out all the personal details. I can see here that ageism's come up quite a bit. Absolutely, it's come up. And, you need to arm your team, whether it's a junior recruiter or a seasoned campaigner, to have those conversations and, deflect those conversations with their hiring managers. And, be almost not so much firm, but you've got to be firm and flexible, but it's all about setting your team up for success to have those conversations with those hiring managers. They're not going to change. They're going to be influenced by us.
So if we're moving to blind resumes where we remove the name and the details, why not go a step further? Could we go a step further and say no resumes? Does it matter where someone worked before, where they studied?
I actually see us going down that way. I really do. I think we've gone away. We've moved quite significantly from those really defined job briefs. And, we have, as a community, taken a lot of risks over the last few years with filling these roles. I actually see us definitely going down that way.
Okay. We might take one more question because we're coming up on time and we've packed a lot into this. What about entry-level people starting their careers, thinking about industries that are, you mentioned earlier, we're one of the biggest companies that nobody, forgive me if I don't repeat exactly, but something to the effect of, we're one of the biggest companies that no one's heard of, or something like that, right? And so, for a company that's not necessarily, that doesn't have a retail brand, that's not Nike or that's not well known, or an industry that's not considered, sexy kind of industry, hot industry, and particularly for people who are not, maybe earlier in their careers, what can we do to sort of really stand out? And you touched on some of this, but I want to end on this note because it's critically important. I think a lot of people are sitting there scratching their head thinking, how do I get ahead of the curve in such a tough market? I can do all these things in my screening process, but if I don't have any applicants, what do I do?
So we're talking early career here. Well, we've actually introduced grad programs. We've got 50 great grads that have already come into our business. And in fact, we've retained all of them. So a really good, solid grad program. I know in North America where we picked up some contracts in that STEM area, we're doing some specific STEM grad programs. But putting that aside, I think where do early career people go? Where are they on Instagram? Are they on, well, not so much Facebook anymore? So you have to use those digital channels to keep current. You can't just put things up on those job boards. It's absolutely engaging via these hubs. And again, you've got to go back to your brand. What is your brand? There's a lot of studies around millennials and Gen X's and Zs and what have you. And you know, one thing that's really come out is that they want to identify and relate to the organisation that they're with. So selling that message across those sort of appropriate digital channels, you know, it's definitely a start.
So let's wrap up and summarise the key things, and help me if I've missed anything. We talked about getting the message out and communicating what we stand for as a company, the impact that people will have by coming to work with us. So that's a key thing. We talked about accessing less obvious pools of candidates, and that's not just about sourcing. It's also about accommodating during the candidate experience, and it's about influencing hiring managers to be more open in their thinking. We talked about using the candidate experience as an opportunity, not as a torture session. And we talked about learning, development, training, setting people up for success when they come into the company, not just going about it business as usual, especially if we're bringing people in who are different to what we're normally doing. But this isn't a hire anybody with a pulse. It is about maintaining high standards, but doing it a little differently. Have I missed anything, or are they the main points we've covered?
I think that was a great summary, actually. I'm impressed.
I've been taking notes with my pen, with my Vervoe pen. So, Melina, I want to really thank you. It's been massively insightful, but also you've been really not just generous with insight, but transparent and open about your own experience in Serco. And I think people really appreciate that. And people always get a lot out of hearing real examples. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to. This is the first of a series of webinars that we're doing on this topic of the skills shortage. Thank you so much to the massive audience that joined today. And again, Melina, thanks so much for joining us today.
Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening in. So I look forward to your next sessions.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Ta. Bye.
Bye.